Hello everyone, I hope you're keeping well. Today I'm starting the discussion of modern horror films and how recent films have produced more sympathetic and dimensional portraits of the female monster. I'd recommend watching my last video first in order to get a sense of the history of horror and how female monsters have largely been demonized and dehumanized. This video is part one of, I think, 2 parts in which I look at modern feminist horrors. This video is going to look at how 3 feminist films update the rape revenge genre to afford more agency to women instead of reducing them and their pain to plot devices. I had a trigger warning at the beginning of this video, but I just want to reiterate that these films deal very heavily with themes of SA and violence against women, and I won't have any graphic depictions or descriptions of SA, but I just want to say that if you are sensitive to that, then I would recommend just doing what's best for you, and if you need to click away, I'd recommend doing that now. Also, ironically, in my discussion of destigmatizing female bodies and more sympathetic portrayals of SA, I have to substitute any graphic or explicit terms because of YouTube's demonetization policy. So please forgive my use of abbreviations and euphemisms. Here's a little glossary of terms that I'm going to be using. For the term rape revenge, I will be saying double or. For the lady hoo-ha, I'll be saying the V. The pen 15 will be P. SEX will be the S word or S. The substitutions make me feel like a fanfiction writer who's trying to say anything but the word penis.
At the sight of Reginald stiffened. Judith! What's another word for engorged?
And I know it's annoying, and I really wish that I could just speak freely, but I didn't censor myself in my last video, and YouTube hit me with the yellow badge of shame. It's like that scene in Succession with Roman and the young boy. I am the young boy. I'm going to look at a brief history of double or films in order to better illustrate how modern feminist films subvert generic expectations or conventions in order to produce more feminist narratives. The double or genre or subgenre of horror thriller is pervasive and divisive. Everybody's going to feel different about it, and however you feel about it is completely valid. Much of the double or genre has been critiqued by feminists and feminist film critics for their exploitation of women's pain and suffering. I'm more interested with the modern feminist engagement with the genre and the attempts to shift it from exploitative to representative of the experiences of SA victims. The shift is visible in front of as well as behind the camera, with more women writing and directing films and drawing from their own experiences. At the end of the section, I'll have more recommendations of film and TV that engage with the or genre in more feminist ways. For the history of double or films, most of them were written and or directed by men, and I'm not trying to dismiss men's experiences of and stories about SA, but most of these films revolve around female victims, but are written and directed by men. So there's an uneven power dynamic at play, where women don't have creative agency in how their stories or stories about female SA victims in general are told. There are also some films that depict men as victims of SA, but this video is a part of my look at women in horror in general, so that's why I'm only focusing on films with female victims. The presence of the or word in cinema goes back to its inception. It's visible in D.W. Griffith's racist KKK propaganda film, Birth of a Nation. But the or genre really rose to prominence in 1961 with the release of Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring. It focuses on the suffering of a father after the or-word and murder of his daughter, and in this film, a woman's pain is used as a narrative device to propel a man on a quest for vengeance, rather than exploring the female pain and the female perspective. This film inspired others, including Wes Craven's 1972 film The Last House on the Left, which similarly focuses on the plight of parents taking vengeance for their daughter's SA murder, once again failing to explore the pain and trauma of the victim and mapping it onto the experiences of others. I Spit on Your Grave in 1978 was the first film in which the victim, Jennifer, exacts her own revenge after she's gang essayed by a group of men. However, the film was slammed for its exploitation of female suffering. The essay scene takes up 25 minutes of the 102-minute runtime, and no scene like that needs to take up 25 minutes of screen time. I think that essay scenes are often completely unnecessary, and the fact that this is so prolonged and graphic makes it feel like the male director is almost relishing in Jennifer's pain. Some argue that the film is a condemnation of male S-word violence and the masculine group dynamics that enable and at times encourage this kind of behavior. Some also argue that this extended depiction of violence against Jennifer acts as a way to identify with her and as a justification for her violent revenge. It's true that the audience aren't encouraged to identify with the male characters, and the film does validate Jennifer's pain by depicting her revenge, but I think that the catharsis from Jennifer's revenge is completely undercut by the disproportionate attention paid to her trauma. I feel like the film doesn't act as an exploration of her trauma, but as an exploitation of it. And this tension between exploration and exploitation is something to keep in mind when examining horror films in general. Nonetheless, I Spit on Your Grave did spark a shift from family members, friends, spouses, etc. exacting revenge for the woman to the woman taking the revenge into her own hands. So for that, I think it's important to include in a history of the double horror genre, even if I don't personally agree with the way it goes about things. The double horror genre continued to develop in the late 20th century, saw more female-centered double horror films with the advent of second-wave feminism. Casey Ryan Kelly argues, the second wave's emphasis on women's sexual agency and the politicization of violence against women laid to the cultural groundwork for depictions of women violently refusing victimhood. Avenging Orward does not on its own advance female empowerment. Instead, a film's political investments are reflected by how violence is enacted and how spectators are invited to identify with the avenging hero or heroine. Kelly also argues that the double horror genre subverts the gendered victim-villain dynamic, writing, the male victim object is portrayed as the real monster of double horror narratives, forced to occupy the unfamiliar but historic disposition of women in the slasher film. The erotic context of these films also draws attention to the distinct S-word threat of women's agency in a culture governed by phallocentric logics. Following on the advances of the 20th century, the 21st century has since seen the rise of more feminist and sympathetic approaches to the double horror formula. I'm going to look at Teeth, Jennifer's Body, and A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night to see how they illustrate the more feminist approaches to the double horror genre. There are more films and TV shows that also approach the double horror genre with a more feminist and sympathetic approach, such as the 2020 film Promising Young Woman, and I already did a video on that, so if you'd like to check it out, I will link it. And I May Destroy You is a TV show that also looks at the aftermath and emotional trauma that comes with SA in great detail. It was written by Michaela Cole, and it draws from her own personal experiences. I'm not looking at that TV show here because it's 12 episodes, and I think it encompasses a lot more than the 90-minute, 2-hour films that I'm looking at today, but I might look at it in a different dedicated video. Modern feminist double horror films tend to humanize the female protagonist and don't just use her SA as a plot device. In some of them, there seems to be a lot more emphasis put on community and female solidarity, but something that links all of them is a pushback against the objectification of and fears surrounding female bodies. And speaking of getting over fears of the notorious VAG, today's video is brought to you by Intimina. Intimina is a Swedish brand that specializes in period products, and they work with an aim to destigmatize periods. I think it's so important to have an open dialogue about menstruation because it's nothing to be ashamed of or scared of. And as well as offering a bunch of different period cups, the Intimina website is full of useful information and funny stories from and for menstruating people. Intimina sent me their Lily cup to try out, and if you know anything about me, you know that I try to make as many things in my life as possible the color pink. So having cute pink period products instead of just a boring clear menstrual cup or white pads and tampons, it just injects a little bit of like fun and joy into my life every time I go to use them. This cup comes in 2 sizes and can be worn for up to 8 hours. My Lily cup is a size A and pastel pink, and it comes with a bright pink carrier bag to store it. The Lily cup B is an equally cute hot pink. I've used menstrual cups before, but I particularly like the Lily cup because it's made of a soft silicone and it folds up to be the size of a tampon, so it's really comfortable to use, and once it's in, you just don't feel it at all. Because of the design of the Lily cup, it's really easy to take in and take out, and I've never experienced any leaks using it. Because menstrual cups are reusable, they're a lot more environmentally friendly than single-use pads or tampons. The Lily cup can be used for 10 years, which could theoretically save a decade's worth of period products from ending up in a landfill. If you're interested in Intimina products, check out the link in my description, and thank you so much to Intimina for sponsoring this video.
The hero must do battle with the woman, the toothed creature, and break her power.
Teeth came out in 2007 and was directed by Mitchell Lichtenstein. The film follows Dawn, a religious advocate for celibacy who's had teeth in her V's since she was born. In the opening scene, Dawn and her stepbrother Brad play "I'll show you mine if you show me yours," and Brad loses the tip of his finger to Dawn's second set of teeth when he tries to touch her. In the present day, Dawn is a youth leader who speaks to kids about the importance of preserving your gift. She daydreams about marriage, doodling wedding dresses during class. Dawn falls for a fellow celibate named Toby, but when Toby tries to SA her, her V bites off his disco stick. Dawn gradually becomes disillusioned with the abstinence group, and she tries to figure out what's wrong with her. She visits a gynecologist who SAs her under the guise of a medical examination, and her teeth bite off his fingers. Dawn becomes more active in the frisky business, and she finds out that no accidents happen to her when she is consenting. She sleeps with her classmate Ryan in a sketchy encounter. She goes over and he gives her a pill to calm her nerves, but when she's hazy and out of it, he starts to SA her. This interaction is framed differently than the other essays because Dawn appears to enjoy it, but we can't ignore how her inebriation affects her ability to consent. The next day, they're banging boots again, and Ryan takes a phone call and he brags about how he slept with her, and he also admits that he slept with her because it was a bet. So Dawn then bites off his pen 15, and this is the first indication that Dawn might have some control over her teeth. Meanwhile, Dawn's terminally ill mother passes away because of the negligence of her stepbrother, and Dawn exacts revenge on her stepbrother by gnawing on his dangly bits. Dawn runs away from home, getting a ride with a creepy old man who, at the end of the car ride, is demanding some bodily payment, and Dawn turns and smiles at the camera, giving an indication that she is going to start using her powers to her advantage. This film is a literalization of the V dentata myth, which is the primal myth that women's V's are equipped with teeth capable of castration. The recurring myth prescribes that a male hero must conquer women and remove their V teeth before he can safely commence with S-word. The legend bespeaks the dread of women that pervades patriarchal cultures and the castration anxiety provoked by the monstrosity of women's V's. This film truly encapsulates societal fears around female reproductive organs and the taboo that surrounds them. During filming in Austin, Texas, the community found out that a film was being made about a girl with a V with teeth. And everybody thought that it was corn because obviously anything to do with a V is corn. The fears of V's is very present in the film. There is censorship of anatomical diagrams of V's. The high school textbooks have a sticker over the V but not the P because
girls have a natural modesty. It's built into our nature.
This mirrors patriarchal attempts to control and censor women's bodies in America in the early 2000s. In the American education system, the V word was removed from books like The Diary of Anne Frank. Then President George Bush spent $1 billion, it's a B, $billion, on abstinence-only education for schools. And this was full of misinformation and shamed women's bodies. One school abstinence program, Heritage Keepers, explains that males are more sight-orientated, whereas females are more touch-orientated. This is why girls need to be careful with what they wear, because males are looking. For this reason, girls have a responsibility to wear modest clothing that doesn't invite lustful thoughts. This monitoring of women's bodies and victim blaming shows how R-word culture is ingrained in society and is even taught in schools. Dawn begins the film brainwashed by the patriarchal, religious, and abstinent discourse. Now, I'm not trying to shame anyone that chooses to be celibate. That is your right, that is your choice. But the film is very clear in its critique of abstinence-only education. Attempts to monitor and control Dawn's body are present everywhere. Her church imposes abstinence as a moral necessity, and she's objectified by her peers who shout catcalls and taunts at her outside school. The R-word culture is even present in the medical field, as Dawn is essayed by her gynecologist, who takes advantage of her naivete. This medical abuse feels especially pertinent now, as there's a growing discourse around the lack of pain medication that is given to people with female reproductive organs during painful procedures like IUD insertions, as well as the strict bans on terminating pregnancies that are present in a lot of US states. In researching this video, I discovered that in the Victorian era, women were treated for hysteria by doctors who would give them a pelvic massage until they reached hysterical paroxysms, and this would supposedly cure them of their anxiety and irritability. This procedure is what sparked the invention of the vibrator in the 1880s, which again was used in medical contexts to treat hysteria. The scene with Dawn's gynecologist and his invasive, illegal examination of her body is reminiscent of the abuse of women's bodies under the guise of medical treatment. The negative effects of patriarchy are also present in the set design of the film. Kelly argues that the nuclear towers as phallic symbols represent patriarchy and the cultural pollution and harm that it causes. A phallic symbol is something that is supposed to represent a pen 15, and it is often signified as a cigarette, a gun, a sword, etc. Dawn's mother has a long-term illness from breathing in the toxic fumes from the power plant, and this represents the damage of patriarchy to women. Women are the principal victims under patriarchal culture, and Dawn's sick mother represents the long-term effects of this cultural pollution, cultural oppression. Dawn's second set of teeth could be a result of this nuclear pollution, but either way, it's framed as a reaction against patriarchal control and abuse. Dawn's ability to bite back at her abusers is framed as a natural evolution. Dawn's teeth only hurt those that touch her without her consent. It's not a curse that she can't control. This notion of evolution is bolstered by a scene in their science class where the teacher discusses how rattlesnakes developed their rattle defense mechanism as a way to survive. And in framing Dawn's adaptation as something necessary to survive, the film says that the real monster of the film isn't Dawn, but R-word culture and the men that essay her. This film doesn't other the monstrous woman. We sympathize with Dawn, and she's allowed a semi-happy ending. Unlike the traditional V Dentata myth, no male hero comes to conquer or cure Dawn. She leaves to forge a life on her own. There is a generic version in the film from women as helpless, cowering victims in slasher films to a female protagonist enacting violence on men who cry, cower, and plead for mercy. I do wish that there were more female characters in this film for Dawn to talk to about her body and her trauma. It seems like Dawn doesn't have the time to fully process her trauma before she's re-traumatized. Also, Dawn is a lone survivor. She's the only person that we see with this defensive adaptation. So the film doesn't offer a solution of a community healing from a collective trauma, and there's really no positive community at all. Like a lot of classic double or films, this film was directed by a man, and I think if there had been more women in the writer's room or behind the camera, the story would have felt more authentic to women's experiences. Both of the next films I'm discussing were written and directed by women, and neither of them feature SA scenes, and they also better capture the notion of community and female solidarity. Jennifer's Body came out in 2009 and was written by Diablo Cody and directed by Karen Kusama. Despite being a box office flop because of mismarketing towards a teen boy demographic, the film has since gained a cult following and has undergone a cultural revival. It was one of the first mainstream double or films to be written and directed by women. The film is set in the fictional town of Devil's Kettle, and it follows two teenage girls in high school who've been best friends since childhood, the bookish, awkward Needy and her popular, attractive friend Jennifer. The two go to a bar to see a local indie band, and after the bar burns down, Jennifer leaves with the band. She arrives at Needy's house later that night, bloody, beaten, and acting inhuman. She growls at Needy, devours a full roast chicken, and vomits black goo, but she pretends all is normal the next day. It's later revealed that the band sacrificed Jennifer in a satanic ritual in order to obtain success. But the ritual required a virgin, which Jennifer was not, and even though the band gains success, Jennifer is turned into a succubus. She must eat people in order to keep her youth and vitality. Jennifer, tired of being treated as an object, reclaims her power by seducing and killing men. But she doesn't see the young men as people and expresses no remorse. Needy decides to put a stop to it to prevent any more deaths. And at the school dance, Jennifer kills Needy's boyfriend, Chip, and after a fight, Jennifer escapes. Needy breaks into Jennifer's house and kills her. The ending is reminiscent of Ginger Snaps in that both have a loved one kill the monstrous woman out of necessity to protect those around them. Needy is imprisoned in a psychiatric hospital but breaks out to get vengeance for Jennifer. During and after the credits, we see that Needy was successful, killing the band that sacrificed her best friend. Though there's no explicit SA in the film, I think it's possible to read the sacrifice of Jennifer as a symbolic SA, and the film follows the double or formula. Constance Grady of Fox states that after the Me Too movement highlighted routine sexual harassment and misconduct in the media industry, the film's story of a group of powerful men sacrificing a girl's body on the altar of their own professional advancement became uncomfortably familiar. This, according to Grady, allowed viewers to see the film as a revenge fantasy as Jennifer used her abused body against the attackers. By using sacrifice as a metaphor for SA, the audience isn't confronted by the violent act of it and aren't re-traumatized as a result of a visual exploitation of SA. Jennifer at no point is reduced to an object or a complete monster by the film. The film doesn't objectify Megan Fox with the male gaze that she's so often been subjected to. Even at moments where she's undressing or undressed, the camera doesn't fetishize her body. But many of the characters in the film do objectify Jennifer. Megan Fox has been vocal about how Jennifer's body reflected her treatment by the film industry and media, saying that they didn't view her as anything but a sex symbol. And Jennifer Check truly embodies this objectification. Towards the beginning of the film, she uses her body to her advantage to get drinks while underage, illustrating how young girls are objectified and may learn to use this objectification to their advantage.
How are you gonna get alcohol? I'll just play Hello Titty with a bartender.
The young men Jennifer lures in fail to view her as a threat because they don't see past her physical appearance. Needy appears to be the only person to see past Jennifer's appearance. When she stabs her in the chest at the end, Jennifer says, "My tit," to which Needy replies, "Oh, your heart," capturing how she is the only character to recognize Jennifer as a person, not just body. It's interesting how the initial reviews of the film mirror the objectification of Jennifer Check. In 2009, Tim Ryan wrote a negative review for Rotten Tomatoes, and the headline is, "Jennifer's body is hot, but the movie isn't." Despite being a monster, Jennifer is humanized by the narrative because of her vulnerability and her experiences. She's not just a monster, she's a victim too. She didn't choose to become a monster, but she was forced to because of the actions of men. Because she's treated less than human, that's exactly what she becomes. Like Teeth, the real monster of the film isn't the monstrous woman, but the way that women have been objectified, exploited, and abused by men. Jennifer's Body is a really astute examination of female friendship dynamics and the toxicity and jealousy that can sometimes fester between best friends. The film emphasizes the importance of community and female solidarity. Jennifer tells Needy about the horrific violence she endured, and we bear witness to this violence, sympathizing with Jennifer. Needy's dedication to and love for Jennifer further humanizes the monster, and we see the depth of their relationship. Their friendship survives past Jennifer's death, as Needy remains committed to her, exacting revenge on her behalf. The relationship also examines queer dynamics between Needy and Jennifer, and the two share a kiss one evening, a scene that the trailers loved to highlight. Jennifer is also canonically bi, which she reveals when she tells Needy that
Thought you only murdered boys. I go both ways.
the queer aspect of this film is really interesting, but as it's not the focus of the video, I thought I would just briefly mention it. I'm so glad that Jennifer's Body is finally getting a critical reappraisal, and not only are people re-examining how they viewed this film, but they're also realizing how horribly Megan Fox was treated. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night is an Iranian-American co-production made by director Anali Amirpour. It's not as mainstream as the others, one because it's an Iranian-American co-production, and it's also more of an art house film. It was dubbed the first Iranian vampire western film, and I think it's really interesting in its exploration of the double or themes. The film is completely in Persian, and it is set in a fictional town called Bad City. With the title, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, you would expect the film to center around an or word perpetrated against a girl or a young woman, but in fact, the titular girl is a vampire vigilante who preys on men that disrespect or abuse women. The vampire's name is just credited as the girl, so that's what I refer to her as. The girl often stalks men at night in a gendered reversal of power. In the film, Arash, a young man, works to sustain his father, Hussein, who is an addict. Elsewhere, an S-worker, Ashi, is extorted by her pimp, the local dealer, who forces her to perform S-acts on him in his car in order to get her cut of money. In the background of this scene, the girl watches on from a distance. The girl later goes back to the dealer's apartment, where she bites off his finger and kills him. The scene mimics the one with the S-worker and the dealer in the car, as both women seductively kiss the man's finger. The girl, however, reappropriates this motion to harm him and take back control. Arash takes over the dealing business and goes to a costume party dressed as Dracula. After taking schmeckstasy, he wanders off and meets the girl in the street. Ironically, he tells her, "I won't hurt you," not recognizing the threat that she poses. She takes him home, and there's a tension where we're not sure whether she'll kiss him or kill him, but she ends up embracing him and the two grow close. The girl scares the next generation of men away from harassing women, going up to a young boy, threatening him and telling him that she'll always be watching him. She also meets up with Ashi and gives her the payment that she's owed. Hussein goes into withdrawal and suffers hallucinations, at which point Arash throws him out. Hussein meets up with Ashi and forcefully injects her with H. The girl, sensing something has taken place, breaks into the house and kills him. While with the girl, Arash later realizes that the girl killed his father because he sees his cat in her house, and the two decide to drive off together anyway. The film doesn't feature any overt SA, but instead includes coercion, extortion, and bodily invasion of women at the hands of men. In this way, it's similar to the other films in that it's a critique of the treatment of women under patriarchal culture and the objectification and subjugation of women by men. While the girl isn't essayed herself, she avenges the injustices committed against Ati. So her justice is more communal than individual, emphasizing the importance of female solidarity in a manner similar to Jennifer's Body. The fact that the girl is a vampire who penetrates her victims with her fangs subverts the gendered associations with violent penetrations. The film is full of animal imagery likening the characters to different animals. The scene where the girl kills the dealer, for instance, takes place in his apartment, which is full of animal prints, rugs, deer heads mounted on the wall. One might assume at the start of the scene that the dealer is the predator. He's wearing a jacket with an embroidered tiger, he has a tiger tattoo, and he gives off a menacing air. However, it turns out that he's more aligned with the prey, the deer heads on the wall, when the girl reveals her fangs and kills him. The film consciously distances itself from other films about female vampires. Unlike other female vampires, who are often highly objectified, whose attractive bodies act as a source of power, the girl finds her empowerment in her quietness and her ability to blend in. The girl wears a chador for the majority of the film, which is a full body cover that leaves the face exposed. There's a scene where she skateboards down a road, and the chador bellows behind her like a cape, which reads like a nod to the traditional Dracula-esque rendition of vampires. The chador also prevents her body from being objectified, as it's covered for most of the film. The girl is allowed a happy ending. She's not punished at any point in the narrative, and she's not killed in order to restore some balance. She finds someone that doesn't fear her and sees her as more than just a monster. The difference between the male-dominated double or genre and feminist revisions to the genre are stark. SA isn't used as a plot device for a woman or other people to enact revenge. There are full and complex explorations of trauma and the objectification of women's bodies. What's interesting about some of these later films is how they map SA onto other acts, like Sacrifice in Jennifer's Body or Injection in A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. And it's a far cry from the 25-minute long SA scene in I Spit on Your Grave. SA victims are treated with more compassion in these films, and they don't become complete vengeful monsters after their trauma. Of course, there are still films in which women's SA functions as a plot device and act as a catalyst for other people's actions, like Taken, for example. Even 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri features the R-word and murder of a daughter as a backstory. And I'm not saying that these films are bad, but I'm thankful that the double R genre has widened to not only include these types of films. In another video, I'm going to look at even more feminist horror and the changing portrayal of the female monster, but that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video.